going to the call to order the City Council Transportation, Energy, and Utilities Committee at 5 p.m. And the first item on our agenda is our agenda. I entertain a motion on that.
I move to adopt the agenda as shown on the circuit board.
Second.
Second, any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor of our agenda indicate by saying aye. Aye.
Aye.
That's unanimous. Second item on our agenda is adoption of our minutes from our July 24th meeting. Have a motion on that?
I'd move the adoption of those minutes.
Second.
Any discussion on that item? Seeing none, all those in favor of adopting our minutes indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. That's unanimous. And next we move on to public forum. Are there any members of the public here in the room? Wait, doesn't want to speak. No. Seeing no members of the public here in the room, are anybody online who'd like to speak in public forum? Indicate by using the raise hand function on Zoom, and we'll promote you.
We've got Quentin, you're up first in queue.
Okay, go ahead, Quentin.
Hi all, this is Quentin Zondervan. I'm the policy director at Run on Climate, and just wanted to announce that we're here and very excited to receive the reports and follow along.
Thank you, Quentin. What else do we have, Rob?
That's all we have signed up for public comment online.
Wow, unexpected. But I will note that we did announce on our agenda that folks who wanted to submit public comment in this meeting, because we knew time would be limited, were advised to do so, and we did receive some couple of comments online. So if you refer to our agenda under public comment, for those of you watching this meeting now or later, you'll be able to see additional comment there. And seeing as we're finished with public comment, we'll move on to our deliberative agenda. And the first item on our deliberative agenda is a GMT assessment methodology study that we had. This is a follow-up from an item we had last month. Reframe Labs was here to introduce this item, and we discussed it briefly, and they're back here this evening. So I will turn it over to you.
Okay, thank you very much. Thanks again for having us for part two. I'm Peter Plano, Michelle Hobbs, my partner in Reframe Lab, and Clayton from GMT is here to correct us as we go along. No.
I'm to be a fly on the wall.
Fly on the wall, okay. So if you recall, we've been retained along with our partners AECOM to work with GMT to examine its current municipal assessment methodology and strategy, and help them figure out what would be a appropriate strategic path forward to sort of re-engineer the municipal assessment system, with an eye towards sustainability of transit service in the region, equity or fairness, if you will, across the municipalities, and other aspects that will help stabilize GMT's fiscal situation and maintain and perhaps lead to growth again in transit service throughout the urban area here. Last month, we introduced a set of sort of topics or questions we were looking for your feedback on. I sent to Mr. Goulding a couple days ago a one-pager kind of read ahead that hopefully you had a chance to look at. and we'd like to sort of continue that discussion today for, I think we have about 20 minutes on the agenda. Really four main topical areas of focus at this point. One is the value and future role of transit, or specifically GMT, in the eyes of Burlington. The current GMT funding and assessment model, how well does that work in your mind? What should be changed? What options are out there? Along with that, are there key barriers and or opportunities for changing GMT's funding approach, such as regional funding options and so forth, that you would like to see considered? And anything else related to this that I would like to convey to us. I will emphasize this is certainly not your very last opportunity to have input on this. This is still a study that has several months to go. We're in the first phase of it now, the sort of information collection. And we've been talking to key stakeholders, partners of GMTs, as well as every urban municipality member of GMT and the state of Vermont. So with that, I'm going to turn it to Michelle, and she'll sort of facilitate our brief conversation here tonight.
Thanks. And so picking up where we left off, I recall some folks having some vivid experiences and insights into the value of GMT to the city of Burlington, to the state constituents of Burlington. Is there any other, so thinking about for local businesses and residents and community priorities, how is GMT serving Burlington in a way that creates equity or creates value for the city? Any particular insights you'd like to share around that?
Do you want to take the four sort of areas?
Yeah.
One by one, and we can just go through the committee.
Right. So really just focused on value and thinking about future role. Is there, are there instances or insights that you can offer as you're thinking through from a transportation perspective for the city of Burlington, the role of GMT in that?
So I'll open up to the committee. Would like to weigh in first.
Here, let me do this just because I got a couple of little ants who are crawling all over me. So we'll see. And I've written this down. So are you looking to have this be done one by one? Like one question at a time?
Yeah, that's how we're going to do it.
Okay, good. Thank you. Thanks. Let me just, so I mean, nothing that I'm going to say in this is, I think, earth-shattering. The value of GMT is that it serves those with no private transit options to go where they need to go. That's absolutely essential. I think another value which is underutilized and served right now is that it's needed to reduce private auto, especially single occupancy vehicle travel, and all of the impacts, climate, infrastructure, traffic, and others that result from people's use of cars. And the third point is that it underscores that transportation, in my mind, is a public good that needs democratic governance and an affordable model so that there's equity in the ways that people get from where they are to where they need to go. And the last point that came to my mind in this review is that it really focuses economic development, the location of economic development, or at least it can, in a way that combats sprawl and all of the negative impacts that result from sprawl. And that's what I got for the first one. I've written these down so I can send an email to somebody afterwards.
Sure. Okay.
Sure.
Thanks, Jean.
Thanks, Jean.
I couldn't have really said it better myself, but yeah, specific, in getting more specific, like whether it's to school, to work, to the hospital, to any other services that people require, and really any form of travel, but especially those to those core needs, public transit is invaluable both in Burlington and I'd say everywhere is how it should be. And yeah, Gene covered a lot of my points. I think in terms of future role, to all the benefits that Councilor Bergman stated, I see GMT's role as even more involved in Burlington and Vermont's transportation plan. And I at least would want the city to do everything we can to be a part of that and to hopefully get the rest of the state on board with making public transit an even bigger part of how we travel in Vermont to all the benefits that have been previously stated.
And I would just echo what Gene and Merrick have said, but also sort of add that it's sort of an assumption that we will have a robust bus system in our transportation policy, our transportation demand management policy, our parking policies that we push through, and our climate policy. So it's essential, I would say, in a lot of the city planning that we've done. And the one thing that I think, assuming we can shore up what we have and find a sustainable funding model, the thing that we would, looking ahead, I would like to see, more frequent service, because I think that would improve the convenience and the ridership. So, we've been sort of advocating for that as a committee and as a council and as a city. And so I'd like to continue, for us to continue to do that. And I'm hoping as part of this planning process that's sort of one of the assumptions that's in there, at least from our perspective, and maybe some of the other neighboring communities.
And adding on to that, looking into the future, I'd say similar to what GMT has done with the 1 and the 11 in regards to shifting the routes to accommodate for development that's happening in South Burlington on Market Street. As more development that hopefully will come and is coming in Burlington, that if needed, new routes are established to cater to that, to those new areas of development, or like in South Burlington, routes are moved to accommodate, to just get more people on the bus and traveling, especially downtown into the downtown transit center, so you can just go everywhere in Burlington.
And we'll let Councilor McKnight, who couldn't attend tonight, know that she can send her thoughts.
Yeah, absolutely.
Shifting to the funding model and also touching some regional options, to what degree are you familiar with GMT's current funding assessment model? How familiar is this committee, to what degree?
You want to lead off again, Gene?
Sure, that's great. That'll be really helpful. So the truth of the matter is I really don't know the intricacies of the model. It's not something that we really spend a lot of time on. It's sort of been baked in for quite a long time. And so when I looked at these questions, I went to the website and the budget document that is posted on there. And I mean, digging is fine for me, but I only like opened up one of the number of documents. It doesn't really reveal the details. So it would really be helpful to know the details so that we can improve our thinking and our proposals for innovation. And I got a little one who is, okay, either you're staying or you're going. The second is that we're raising significant revenues. Clearly, Burlington's share is really high, but whether or not they support the system that we need is unclear to me. And when I say we, I mean the city of Burlington and our residents and also the employees and other people who are coming in. And so I just want to echo what Mark said about head times and other things that Merrick also said. And then the last point that I have on this is the question of what a system should be now and going forward is one that I don't think the model is posing and answering sufficiently, even though this assessment may be an indication that it can and that it will. So, I mean, this is a really good step that you're taking, and I want to thank Clayton for initiating it and the rest of the folks that did that, and for you to taking it up, because I think that what the question does is it opens the conversation, and I think that we need to have that conversation in town to see if we're actually getting the biggest and best bang for our buck and what alternatives there are. Thank you.
Yeah, I'm also not very familiar with the intricacies of the funding model. I do know that a lot of it comes from, I know it comes from all three levels of government, but especially on the local level, I'm not very aware of what the formula looks like and how it's spread out. So I can't really speak to how I would want the local level at least improved. I would of course will always advocate for the federal and state government making a concerted investment in public transit. But on a local level, I would want more education on how the current funding model works before I could give suggestions on how I think it could be better. I mean, I'm aspirationally, I guess how I would want it is that Green Mountain Transit was assumed into a Vermont Transportation Authority with the access to budgetary funds that come with that. But we're not in that world yet. Thank you.
And I would again echo, I mean, the things that I guess I'm aware of are the things that we as a committee and as a council have tried to influence the last 3 years, which are, we've been, strong advocates at the state level for the component of GMT funding that comes from the state of Vermont, and obviously advocating for our own local investments when they've been brought forward and they've asked us to support those. So I would welcome like a one-pager on like all the intricacies if they could. I know that there's a component around, there's federal funding that's tied to local matches and things, that could be distilled into something that was understandable. I think it would be helpful to us. It wouldn't change the advocacy that we've been doing, because I think we can only, we can push on certain things and other things are sort of beyond the scope of our ability to influence. But I think that was the greatest challenges. The greatest challenges to funding, I think, that we can influence have been the unwillingness of the state to find a sustainable funding model. There's been a number of ideas that have been bandied about, but it seems like at the end of any session, we're still like scratching and clawing for whatever Clayton and others can advocate for. And we really need something that is reliable and sustainable at the state level so that GMT can not be in a constant crisis mode and be using all of that bandwidth they're using to try to scare up funding to do the kinds of planning that I think that they would like to be doing. So I think that's one of the big challenges going forward.
Finishing up that line of questioning, is there any regional or county level funding approaches that come to mind, or does Burlington feel positioned to entertain a regional or county funding solution or approach, and what would be a challenge or an opportunity related to that?
What was that an add-on question, sort of like a follow-up to?
It is a little bit of a follow-up.
Yeah. It seemed like it, and I think it's a really good one. Me personally, I'm really open to opening up the conversation to how we fund the system that we need. And we're not doing that. And I think that maybe we're looking at it from the standpoint of the traditional, we're doing the Fed thing, we're doing the state annual appropriation, and then everybody's got a local share. But that does leave out, sort of the way that we work together. Yeah, I mean, our folks in Burlington need to get to the doctor at Tiddly Lane. They need to go work in Williston at Walmart and other places out there. They need to go to the doctor on Dorset Street. I mean, and folks go back and forth between Burlington and Winooski all the time. So we need to be doing that and thinking about what is the sort of what are the needs and how we can bring local resources to bear and what kind of opportunities and ideas are out there. And maybe there are none except for the brainiac ideas that we'll bring in Burlington, in which case then we'll have to look at it, from that standpoint. So I would love, and I think this does segue into the next point that you were asking.
Thanks, Jane.
Yeah, I completely agree. As I said, how I would want to see GMT is a fully statewide, state-run, completely state and federal funded transportation operation. And I think the next best thing is if we're not collaborating with all the relevant areas in the state, then we should collaborate on a county level. For example, we don't have county governance in Vermont, but there are entities like the CCRPC and the Vermont League of City and Towns that we could tap in terms of collaboration within Chittenden County at least. And that's something, that type of collaboration is something that I've always been interested in personally, and I think it does fit in good for GMT and for transportation, because as Councilor Bergman said, most of the routes don't end in Burlington. Well, a lot of them do, but yeah, we got routes to South Burlington, routes to Williston, routes to Winooski, the longer routes, the commuter routes. I've taken the Montpelier link a bunch of times. Like if there was some collaboration, especially in regards to funding, to see that the services improve for everyone everywhere, that doubly helps Burlington. It helps people travel from Burlington to other places, and it helps people travel from other places to Burlington. And so I'm all for that.
And I would just add that I think we've been doing the advocacy and taking Clayton's lead on a lot of things, because I know that he's also interacting with a lot of our municipal neighbors. It would be interesting to convene a larger roundtable on this and to try to exchange some ideas and see if we can't come up with some thinking that doesn't present itself when it's Clayton's he's the hub and we're one of the spokes, and if we could get everybody in the same room, we might be able to think up some different ideas. So I think that's an interesting idea, is to collaborate more closely. I also have concerns because I know last budget cycle we were talking about how with the increased assessments, how some of the sort of linkage communities might leave the system, which, with this, and if you don't have the connectivity all the way across the system as you need it, then the whole thing starts to unravel on you. So I think it's important for us to have those regional scoped discussions to make sure that the overall network stays intact.
We'll shift into the barriers and opportunities line of questioning. So what factors might prevent Burlington from supporting changes to the funding approach, to changes in the funding approach, including a regional funding option?
Go ahead, Jean.
So I don't know that I prepared for that question, Michelle.
Okay.
So I mean, what are the barriers for us moving into that? I think
What factors might prevent Burlington from supporting a change to the funding mechanism? So understanding the different stakeholders involved, maybe perceived as a threat to Burlington, what would that look like if there was?
I think the biggest is the question of affordability and the sources of fund. And that's on a political, on a like a mass or a grassroots level, right? I think that people are really nervous. You okay? Okay. 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 Yeah. Maybe you should go get something to drink. Um, so I think that is the biggest one. I don't think that we are politically, at least the governance folks that I'm aware of, both either staff or political or executive branch, or legislative or executive branch, are seeing that, we're the big shot and therefore everybody's got to kowtow to us and do what we need to do. I think that there is a general understanding that we need this desperately in Burlington. This is where so many people in need the services, but it's bigger than us. And just like all of these other social problems that we've got, we need folks to be working with as partners. So I'm not sure that there is that block that I think exists. Perceptions are everything. So how folks in South Burlington, et cetera, are thinking about us, and then how we react to that is some consideration. But internally, I'm not seeing it. I really think that our community is willing to step up and also recognizes the nature of it, as long as it's not going to cost another couple of arms and legs.
Yeah, I don't think I have that much to add. I think, as Councilor Bergman said, I think this is something that Burlingtonians want and want more of. It aligns with all of our goals for the future in multiple areas, and is much needed. I think what we need, if we were to go to do any sort of changes, is that we would need that cooperation and collaboration with other communities, and there needs to be some type of shared value and shared goal for public transit with partners, and what basically like a commitment to what GMT has been doing, like the commitments to equity and affordability.
Michelle, could I ask a follow-up?
Sure.
Earlier, we heard that folks were sort of uncertain about how our assessment methodology, works. Is that a barrier to additional funding from your perspective, the lack of understanding?
Do you want to?
Sure.
Do you want to go?
Yeah,
ahead.
I mean, I think that it is, because, not only is it the lack of understanding, but it's the way that we're sort of locked in to the current system. And just to sort of put the third point of what of the question that you posed, as how well the funding and governance model is working and what changes are needing. I really think that the fiscal crisis is showing that the model is insufficient and that we need significant new revenue streams. And I think the board model is not engaging our communities deeply enough. And I am not blaming when I say that our commissioners, we have Chapin there right now. This is because the board is focused on the day-to-day stuff. I've been on boards. I know how hard that is. So I think what we're talking about, what you're proposing is something bigger. The board, I think, and the management has to sort of unleash that conversation. But I just think that the model that we've got right now is not engaging our communities deeply enough, and is not focused on the regional coordination that we're talking about in a way that looks at these fundamental and overarching questions that are future looking. So I mean, I mean, part of the problem is just we're in crisis mode all the time. So I totally understand that. If I was in that position, it would be I'd be in a similar place as they are. So this is a great opportunity, I think, to figure out maybe a different way to doing that. And I don't know. I mean, we only have we pay what, 50% of the local share, but we get 2, and so we're not 50% of the votes. Whether that is actually politically a smart thing or not, is I think a real and open question. But if it is smart, we got to get some more bang for the buck. And that could just be in the conversations, and you all know, actually you do, Peter, and Michelle don't, but Clayton knows, and Chapin knows that I've been harping on TDM a lot, and the way that we can, use TDM programs. And it's not just Burlington's TDM program. It's like the whole county needs to get on board on that. And that's a regional approach, because people are going from here to there and there to here. Okay, thanks.
I'll answer Clayton's question first. I don't know that it is really an obstacle, because we have passed assessments to this point without a lot of friction. I think where the friction would come would be like there's parts of the transportation system now that are more expensive than others, like the SSTA service, for instance, where you have one person riding around, a fairly good sized vehicle that can seat, 15 people. And those sorts of things, if Burlington was through the dollars they were contributing, was paying to subsidize that kind of service, just as an example, I think it's an essential service. Or some of the rural routes that don't have the ridership that they need to be financially viable on their own, then I think that would be a problem. But as long as those parts of the system that may not be as economically viable are paid for with federal or state dollars, I think that Burlington would continue to entertain. I mean, this I'm guessing, but we continue to entertain getting, paying a little more to get additional value out of the system, but not necessarily to subsidize other parts of the system that don't make as much economic sense. And those are Burlington as well. Not that the SSTA, I don't want to be on record as saying I'm against SSTA, because I'm not, because I know that, but there may be other microtransit options that are just better uses of scarce financial resources. And I had invited Chapin in my email when I was queuing this up for committee members. As a board member, if you have any perspectives you wanted to share during this public segment, you're welcome to, but
Sure.
Certainly not required to.
No, it was helpful. I really appreciated the opportunity to speak with the consultant team last week, and Clayton and I have a number of open and honest ongoing conversations. The financial situation for GMT is putting the board in a reactionary mode and taking away our time to do what Councilor Bergman is asking, which is good, that the board should be looking ahead and not managing the issues of today. We're not there because we're chasing our tail. We do need, and we have discussed, leadership committee on the board focusing more on the legislative strategy for this coming session. We know we need to somehow crack this regional or state funding challenge, because I don't believe, Councilor Barlow's point, that yes, we can keep funding the assessment at the general level we are doing with a 4% every year. But if we need 20 or 30 or 40% a couple of years in a row on the property tax, this has become a major issue and likely going to drive many communities other than Burlington out of GMT. Burlington is one of the most invested communities, but there are certainly communities that are talking about walking away. And so we either need a regional approach here, which to the point likely requires a different board composition. We have a regional funding model. We probably need a broader range of stakeholders than the appointees from municipalities that are members. And so I think governance probably needs to walk hand in hand with the funding model that is viable. And the board has a work plan to come up with a recommendation by this fall, by November, to give Clayton clear marching orders for the legislative session. So we're really going to need to distill quickly what we're hearing from you and other communities and pick the least worst option of the regional funding tools, because no option is going to be liked by a lot of people. So I look forward to working with you all. If there's things I'm missing, let me know. I have proactively sought to pull a meeting together of Burlington's 4 commissioners. We have 2 regular commissioners and 2 alternates. We'll be meeting not this Friday, but next Friday, to try to get us on the same page so that we're working on your agenda. So to the extent that you can tell us where you want us to go, then I can work with the commissioners to kind of push our group of advocates on the board to get the full board moving in hopefully your direction.
Thank you. I'm just going to time keep us. If we could wrap up in the next 5, is that reasonable?
Absolutely. I think we've covered a lot of the substance of the questions that we have presented. And certainly if there's any other insights or concerns or ideas that you want to bring to us at this moment in terms of how collaboration could occur, what sustainability means, observations you made in other districts or communities outside of Burlington or Chittenden County or Vermont, but you're welcome to share that at this time.
Gene?
Yeah, so I'd love to get a vigorous regional planning effort out there that really gets into the communities. What do people want? You know, the micro transit is a big thing, and we got a solicitation from Via Transit, which is a private entity, and I think they are in the Upper Valley. And when we've talked about things to improve the situation, say on North Winooski Avenue after the bike lanes, there is a lot of talk of sort of a more specialized, quicker. That goes back to what Mark was saying in terms of the head times. So I think that is something that requires a lot of conversation, right? And there are all sorts of stakeholders. So when I think about the stakeholders, I mean, I think about the councils and select boards more directly. I think about the planning and economic development staffs. I think about big employers and developers, and then the strategic inclusion of state legislators. Let me just end by saying Clayton did a really fine Zoom call with legislators, and it was actually fairly stunning how ignorant they were. And I don't say that in the negative sense. They're just like not connected. And, there are some that have gotten more connected as a result of that engagement. But we've got to have a more rigorous approach here. Yeah, that's it. Thanks.
Thank you. Other thoughts?
No, I think as I said before, I think there are some county level and regional structures and institutions that exist that could facilitate that type of regional collaboration and conversation, even if it is like a round table with representatives for municipalities. So I would recommend that, and I would be interested in taking part in something like that. But yeah, like Councilor Bergman said, when it comes to the advocacy on the state level, I think Clayton has done a good job, and it is about the education. I think it just speaks to the wider problem with our state government and that our legislators they don't get paid enough, and they don't have enough time to cover everything that is happening, and so a lot of things fall through the cracks. So how can we ensure that public transit doesn't fall through the cracks?
And I'll just end by saying that I'm looking forward to having these conversations with other communities, and I'm really curious to hear what kind of feedback they're getting.
Yeah, so I would say there's a lot of overlap with what you all expressed, but there are some differences, as I'm sure you could imagine, depending on who you're talking. I did have one follow-up question. I know we're running short on time. Kind of some of the comments tonight have kind of gotten at the issue of, and Gene's most recent comment about kind of broad understanding or appreciation of the value of the role of transit. You know, what does it do for us, even if you're not a rider? Is there something there? I mean, is that something that you think there should be a more focused or concentrated effort to sort of educate the region on what does transit do for us, and and how that might relate to funding alternatives?
Gina, we're into the lightning rounds now, so.
Yeah, I mean, folks, I think at least from the governmental level in Vermont and in Chittenden County, don't talk about throwing away working people and poor people like there's so much trash. And so if those are the folks that are on the buses, then I think that, people will articulate and, the need. And we should do a better job of that. The story in 7 days was a really good one, and it really talked about the challenge. And then, the questions that were raised by the bus driver, who talked about more kids getting on the bus as opposed to getting dropped off at school or walking. That also raises the question of that conversation. So I think that we need to do that, Peter. I think that we need to have this conversation in a more robust way. And it speaks to, like I said, planning, and it speaks to economic development as well as social equity.
Yeah, I think just generally, people appreciate and want to support public services when they know what they're getting out of it. And it's certainly easier to know what you're getting out of it when you are a participant, a direct participant in it, with water, for example. Like, we were able to get Burlingtonians to make massive investments in our water because there was an education campaign about what you get out of it, and how it will help the city and help folks. I think that would translate to public transportation as well, both, like you said, for the people who are direct beneficiaries of transit. That's a lot easier when you know that, well, I don't want my bus runs to go from 20 minutes to 30 minutes, or 30 minutes to an hour, or not exist at all anymore. But also, someone, hypothetical person, drives their car, doesn't want more cars on the road. As simple as that. I think that education is a huge part of it. I think it's a good idea.
Yeah, I would concur. I mean, to Gene's point earlier, our legislative delegation not being sort of totally tuned up on the intricacies of the bus system, understandable, but an education system would be good to build sort of public awareness and support an educational effort. I do think Burlingtonians generally, they've always surprised me in my time on the school board, time on the council. We have these giant asks of them, and I said, there's no way they're gonna vote for that. Or support it, but if we make the case effectively, they always do, in like amazing margins. So I do think there is something to that, but I think it would have to be, paired with this regional discussion, because like we said at the outset, yeah, Burlington can be all in on this thing, but if nobody else is, there's probably not enough money there to make a system that's useful and has the value that you would have to have in order for Burlington to support it. So it's a little chicken and egg-ish. Clayton, or
all right, well, we'd like to thank you for your time this evening, and this has been a great conversation, really meaty, I guess we would say. Just really quick, where we go from here is we have a couple more of these municipal meetings to do around the region. Those will be done by early September. And in the September-October timeframe is when we will be working on distilling all this to start developing our proposed recommendations and strategic roadmap, as we're calling it. I also want to mention that in the interests of making sure that we're being comprehensive in this analysis, we are also, with our partners at AECOM, looking at other comparable transit systems around the country to see what sort of possible options might be applicable to our situation here. So that will be part of the end package. And again, our time frame is mid to late October to get Clayton our initial draft recommendations, and then the full report kind of by the end of the year. But so one other thing is we do contemplate at this point, once we have our initial recommendations and findings together, is to potentially convene some sort of regional session, possibly working with the RPC, who's offered to do something like that, to feed back what we've heard, from across everything and what we're thinking, and get your feedback on that, kind of in the spirit of what you're describing.
Excellent. Well, thank you, Peter and Michelle. And Gene, to your point, you were asking how you can feed any written comments. Peter's email is at the bottom of the memo that's attached to the
or Gene, you could just send them to Clayton and he'll get them to us as well.
Okay.
And
Okay.
I'll let Councilor McKnight know as well.
Great.
Thank you so much. Okay, we'll close that item. And we will move on to item 4.2, the BEV Synapse and Building Electrification Institute presentation. And I'll turn it over to General Manager Springer to start us off on this.
Great, thank you. So as the TEUC knows, we had engaged as part of the policy development process following the enactment of the Energy Benchmarking Ordinance, which is currently underway and results for which are due in the spring of 2026. We engaged with Synapse, and we have Shelley and Philip here from Synapse to do some modeling for us on real-world buildings in Burlington, looking at how we might advance policy following the energy benchmarking, but also giving us some cost-benefit information that we think is very important. Chris is here with me, and Jen Green, I believe, is online, and the three of us have been working with Shelley and Philip on designing this, and they've modeled for us 3 different buildings in Burlington. And then we also have Katie Campbell-Auroch from the Building Electrification Institute, who we've worked with for several years. And Katie, following the Synapse presentation, Katie has some useful slides for us on how what we call building performance standards, or we can call Bureau, or other similar policies look around the country, and some considerations for us as we embark on a policy discussion. Just a couple quick points I'd add before we jump into the Synapse modeling. The first is one of my takeaways from the Synapse modeling is that it's going to present, I think, some bounding for us. There's a couple of cases within the modeling that shows really very decent results on a cost-benefit basis, and there's one that shows a very negative result. So looking as we embark on the policy process, looking at different types of buildings and tailoring whatever we ultimately decide on in Burlington to meet the needs of different buildings is going to be really important to avoid those types of negative cost-benefit results. The type of system in a building, whether it is a hydronic boiler-based system or whether it's a rooftop-based unit, is going to matter quite a bit. The age of the building is going to matter quite a bit in terms of how it's impacted by a proposed policy. I also just want to emphasize that based on our research, Burlington would be the smallest community in the country to adopt this type of policy. I believe Newton, Massachusetts is currently the smallest community to have adopted such a policy. So we will be taking on something that no other community our size has done. There's certainly a kind of a administrative and staffing capacity challenge to that. And I know Bill Ward's not here, but I want to make sure that the Department of Permitting Inspections needs in terms of any administrative capacity are addressed as we kind of move forward. And the last thing I'll share is we're not here, BED, the administration, we're not here offering any proposed policy this evening. We definitely are interested in the TEUC's response to the presentations tonight. We'd like the opportunity ourselves to sort of digest the information as well. And if it's of interest, we'd be happy to come back over the next several months and engage with stakeholders, including potentially impacted buildings on this idea, as well as develop more policy thinking around where we go from here with these ideas. So with all that said, we're going to turn first to Shelley and Philip, and they're going to share screen and present on the modeling, and then we'll move to Katie afterwards, and Chris and I are here to offer thoughts or answer questions as well. So Shelley, over to you.
Thanks, Darren. Are you able to see the screen and hear me okay?
Yes.
Awesome. Well, good evening, everyone. Thanks for your time today. Like Darren said, I'm Shelley Kwok from Synapse Energy Economics, and I'm joined by my colleague, Philip Esch Gates, and we'll be presenting the results of our weatherization and electrification case study analysis that we conducted over the past few months for BED. Synapse has been providing support for government clients since its founding in 1996. And in the last 5 years, we've actually completed 10 different projects related to building performance standards for multiple municipal clients, including Boston, Cambridge, and Newton, Massachusetts. And we've also had the pleasure of working with BED in the past, including on the development of the Net Zero Energy Roadmap back in 2019. So it's been great to work with you all again on this. So for this particular project, our goal was to analyze the net cost of installing energy efficiency measures at 3 sample commercial buildings in Burlington to help inform this future BPS policy. We focused on modeling weatherization and space heating electrification measures, which would in turn decrease the building's overall energy use intensity, or EUI, to help them comply with the future building performance standard. We calculated EUI as the amount of energy consumed by the building per square foot. In the analysis, we modeled 2 different office buildings, one that was older and one that was newer, as well as 1 retail building. We did this by creating an Excel model that we developed to calculate the difference in capital costs and utility costs between a base case and a retrofit case. So the base case was a fossil fuel space heating system with no envelope upgrades. And the retrofit case was an all-electric space heating system with envelope upgrades if applicable to that particular building. We relied on NREL's Comstock model to develop our energy savings estimates. Comstock is an open source model that conducts building energy simulations to estimate the change in annual energy consumption for commercial buildings under different scenarios. BED and VGS were able to provide us with electricity and gas rate forecasts over the study period, and we did account for any rate class changes that might occur on the gas side as a result of fuel switching from gas to electricity for space heating. For our equipment costs, we reviewed a multitude of different publicly available cost data sources and ended up using some different information from the US Energy Information Administration, as well as a few other states' energy efficiency programs. For those programs, we did use locational cost adjustment factors to translate them to be more Vermont equivalent costs. And then lastly on this slide, BED did help us provide estimates of equipment incentives and envelope incentives that would be available to buildings that are similar to the ones that we modeled in the case studies. And we did not incorporate any federal incentives on top of that.
Which, as a side note, is good because they're basically all gone now, unfortunately.
Just a few other things before I dive into the results. So for the base case, we assumed a one-for-one replacement would occur upon the failure of the existing system. So for the most part, those are all going to be the fossil fuel-based systems. And then the retrofit case assumes that an all-electric system would be installed upon the failure of the existing system. We assume that the whole space heating system would be replaced at one time, whereas we know in reality that may actually happen over a phased period of time. And the analysis timeframe that we selected begins in 2030 and extends for 15 years, though the final policy may end up taking effect in a different year. And just a few caveats to note about the analysis is that our capital cost estimates are relatively high level. We know that in reality, costs can vary wildly from project to project, depending on particular buildings' characteristics. So for that reason, we recommend focusing on interpreting the relative cost differences between the base case and the retrofit case, rather than focusing too much on the exact cost numbers. Similarly, the energy savings are based off of buildings with similar characteristics as included in Comstock and could be different than what a building experiences in reality upon installing these measures. So with that, I will start to dive into the results. As a preview, our analysis showed that installing the decarbonization and envelope measures were very successful at reducing energy use intensity across all three buildings. The space heating electrification measures in particular resulted in a lot of energy savings. As Darren kind of alluded to, we found that buildings in Burlington that are gas heated by rooftop units can electrify with pretty minimal incremental costs relative to fossil fuel alternatives, which is promising. However, the economics of electrifying buildings that rely on high temperature central boilers are more challenging today and would benefit from more flexible policies to accommodate that. The cost impact from a utility bill perspective was relatively small, not a major difference between the base case and the retrofit case across the three buildings. The capital costs for the electrification measures tended to be higher than the fossil fuel alternatives, particularly for the water-based boiler system. However, BED does have incentives that would help offset some of that upfront cost differential for the electrification equipment. So now I'll walk through the results building by building. Our first building is a retail building that was built in the 1920s, so it has relatively little wall insulation. The building's heated by natural gas rooftop units that look similar to the ones shown here on the slide. And the building's exterior is covered with wooden siding. So for the retrofit case, we modeled swapping out those natural gas rooftop units with all electric heat pump rooftop units with all electric backup. And we tested out the cost and energy impacts of installing an additional 3 inches of exterior wall insulation to help improve the building envelope. So here are the results. By switching out the gas heating system with the heat pump heating system, the building sees a 49% reduction in energy use intensity. That's shown on the left in figure 1. Figure 2 shows the breakdown of the annual utility costs between gas and electricity. So in all 3 of the buildings we modeled, natural gas costs in yellow decreased in the retrofit case, and electricity cost in blue increased. For this particular retail building, the annual utility costs did go up slightly. From an equipment cost perspective, we found that the heat pump rooftop unit would be about an incremental $2,000 over the gas version of the rooftop unit. However, there would be potential for a building owner with this type of system to take advantage of incentives from BED up to around $7,800. So when we crunch the numbers across the 15-year analysis period, what we see is that with incentives, the net cost differential is only about 1%. So the retrofit cost is 1% higher than the baseline. And then without the incentives, it would be about 3% higher. This slide shows the same results, but with the envelope measures layered on. So we see that the exterior insulation has the ability to decrease the EUI by 52%. So that's in incremental 3%, I believe. However, this also does result in increased costs. Our kind of back the envelope math shows that the envelope improvement would be around $60,000 investment. There may be incentives that could be up to $20,000 to offset this. I'll just note that in our capital cost for the envelope measure, we didn't include replacement of the exterior siding, which would be required in a building like this. We would recommend pairing the insulation upgrade at a time when the exterior siding needs to be replaced naturally so that it doesn't result in a further incremental cost. And I think that's all I had to say about this particular slide. So I can move on to our next building. The second building we modeled was a newer office building that was built in the 2010s. So it already has a relatively good building envelope and it has an all glass facade. From a space heating perspective, it relies on natural gas water sourced heat pumps. So for this building, we needed to swap out the system for an all electric heat pump boiler. And we did not model any envelope upgrades. In this building, switching to a heat pump system reduces the energy use intensity by 46%. Again, the gas costs, the gas utility costs go down while the electricity costs go up, resulting in a slight increase in annual utility costs. The equipment costs for the heat pump boiler system is currently quite a bit higher than a gas boiler. This is because air-to-water heat pump technology is still relatively newer to the market, so it is a little bit more expensive as a result. So when you factor in the utility costs and the equipment costs over the study period, it's about double to electrify versus install the baseline equipment upon failure. We do expect that costs could come down in the future for an air-to-water heat pump technology as it continues to develop, and there may be other feasible electrification options that are lower cost than the boiler measure that we modeled in this analysis. Okay. And then our third and last building is an older office building that was built around 1900. It has very little wall insulation and is heated by natural gas rooftop units, which is the same type of system that the retail building had. So for the retrofit case, we modeled switching those out for all electric heat pump rooftop units. Given the age of the building, we also incorporated the costs of an electrical panel and wiring upgrade to accommodate for the heat pump system. And we did model a envelope improvement measure as well. So this building was able to achieve a 63% reduction in energy use intensity by switching from the gas to electric rooftop units. The annual utility costs, again, increased slightly, I think by around 7%. The equipment cost differential for the heat pump rooftop units was about $5,000 more than the gas rooftop units. However, there might be a potential for up to $20,000 in incentives for this system to help offset that. So figure 3 shows the baseline retrofit and retrofit plus incentive case. Without incentives, it comes out to be around a 5% increase relative to the baseline. And then with incentives, it's only a 1% increase in total costs. So given the brick exterior of this building, it's likely not feasible or cost effective to add exterior wall insulation to this building. And a more suitable building envelope improvement measure would be air sealing. Unfortunately, Comstock does not currently support modeling air sealing as a modeling option. So we just modeled the exterior wall insulation as a proxy so that you all could get a sense of the EUI impact and utility cost impact of an envelope improvement for this building. This showed that the EUI could be further decreased by 8% and that annual utility bills could be lowered than the baseline with this additional weatherization measure. So that is the end of our slides. I'm happy to take questions and go back to any other slides that you'd like to see again. Thank you.
Thank you. That's a very informative presentation. I'll open it up to the committee right now for any questions. Jean or Merrick, do you? Go ahead, Jean.
I need to digest this stuff. I'm a little bit confused in terms of the cost statements there, in terms of what, like we're talking about monthly costs in utility bills. Also, you've got capital costs that need to be amortized. It might be really helpful to get a sense of exactly what that means in English that a layperson like myself can grasp a little bit clearer. This is not a criticism of the report, because you got to be judicious with the amount of words that you put on a PowerPoint, but that might be really helpful. But it seems that the break between the water systems and the hot air systems is a big one. And we did see that conversation in the district heating conversation related to the UVMMC and McNeil. So it's it's just a point. I'm not sure what and perhaps from this there are ways for us to think about how we move those buildings into the improvement in EUI, because this is significant. I mean, even the 49% one is that's a lot of energy reduction, right? 50%. So 46% reduction. Post retrofit thermal, is that
Yes, so yeah, thanks for the comments and the question. I can shed a little bit of light on the way we came up with the total like levelized costs, if that would be helpful. Essentially, I incorporated an estimate of what the annual utility costs would be for each of the 15 years, incorporating the forecasts that VGS and BED provided. And then the capital costs were spread out over that 15-year period as well. And so we did use a discount rate to appropriately spread out the costs over that period. So the sum of the annual utility costs and the levelized equipment costs is what's shown in figure 3.
So, I mean, just looking at this newer office building as the example, the upfront capital cost would be $200,000. That's what that says, right? So I'm going to do this stuff. I've got to put up $200,000. And then we're amortizing that over a 15-year period. And that is going to include some incentives. And it says potential for incentives up to 175,000 of the 200,000.
So the $200,000 is the estimated cost of the gas baseline system. And then the estimate for we're looking at the newer office building with the hydronic boiler system. And the retrofit capital costs for that hydronic system for a heat pump version of that is about 1.3 million.
Okay.
And so the data that we got from BED is that incentives for that project might be around $175,000. So that would be deducted from the 1.3 million.
So the baseline is the replacement of the system when it needs replacing. We got a hydronic system right now. It's at the end of its life. We're going to replace it with the modern system of the same type. It's going to cost us $200,000.
Correct.
Okay.
If I could just offer a thought as we're talking about it, and Gene, trying to get to your point in terms of summary, what I took away from this is we know that natural gas is very cheap. So when you switch from gas to electric, there is a little bit of upward cost pressure in the utility bills on an annual basis. We see that, I think, in each of the cases. When you switch from gas to electric, though, you can go from being 80% efficient with a boiler or with gas equipment to being, 300% efficient with heat pump equipment. So you see that dramatic energy reduction overall in the building that we like to see and that we can get with electrification. That's another takeaway. The last takeaway for me is with the rooftop units, there's almost a pretty slam dunk case for when they go, replace them with electric or hybrid electric units, get the incentives from BED, pay the same or less than you would for gas, and get a significant energy reduction. So maybe there's a policy hook there with, hey, when you're going to replace a rooftop unit in these types of buildings, we really want you to do electric. On the flip side of that, if you were replacing a water-based system currently, the electric technology is not as far down the cost curve and is much more expensive, and putting a requirement in place for that type of system with today's technology could be prohibitively expensive for the building. Those were some of the things I took away from that.
Okay, that's really helpful, and it's beyond the scope of this to know what the numbers are in terms of buildings. I mean, we don't have a huge number of these buildings. I mean, the universe was actually relatively small, but now that we understand this breakdown, we could do some additional work to identify the two galaxies that are out there in this universe of buildings that we've got. I didn't mix my metaphors. That's pretty good. And because I always do. Thank you, Darren. That makes a lot of sense. And I reckon that in the replacement, of the hydronic systems, people have choices to make. And so regulation comes into play with how to direct those choices so that they are the most efficient, as opposed to necessarily the cheapest, since there's a dual incentive here if there are triple net leases, so that the tenant is fundamentally paying for it even though they don't own it. So thank you. This is really great.
Mary, thoughts?
Yeah, I don't really have any questions. I think that this is, reading this through, it all makes sense to me. It's really great to hear. It makes me very excited to see the, more information that we can get in the spring and how we can, actually put these projections into action. The obvious outlier on the air to water systems, due to technology not being there. Again, it makes sense to me, the explanation. And as we're going through this, that makes me want to think about how we can future-proof our legislation for when the technology does come up. But that's way down the line. Overall, thank you for this. I'm very excited to see more data in the future. Thank you.
And I'll just say, and I said it at the outset of the discussion, I thought your presentation had exactly the right amount of information in it. It made the case. And so compliments on that. I thought it told me everything I needed to know about these three classes of buildings, and will help us with future policy discussions. I guess a couple of my questions are around some of the assumptions about the incentives. We know that the incentive landscape is sort of in flux right now, and so some of the assumptions about like how much BED incentive might be in the future. I mean, that seems to be an area that I just was wondering if Darren or Chris could comment on that a little bit. And then I have another question after that.
Well, I'm going to actually ask Chris to jump in, because I think you provided some of the assumptions based on current incentives. So maybe if you could talk about that.
Yeah, it's a very good point. So as folks know, we are a regulated entity, and our energy efficiency programs need to go through a process with the Public Utilities Commission and needs to get support from the Department of Public Service. There's a lot of study that goes into both our EEU energy efficiency programs and our Tier 3 fossil fuel reduction programs. Heat pumps are relatively new to cold climate. They've been around for a long time in more mild and warmer climates. But here, the regulators do spend time studying whether or not they're doing what they're supposed to do. So all of that goes to what we're able to claim as savings, both on the Tier 3 side for fossil fuels reductions and on the EEU side to put in higher efficiency heat pumps that reduce electric loads. So are the rebates going to stay the same for the next 10 years? We don't know that right now. We don't know the disposition of all of the programs. Are heat pumps an incredibly important part of the state's climate goals? They have to be. But we can't guarantee the level going forward.
To put a finer point on that, there's some uncertainty even within the next 3-year budget cycle around whether mini split heat pumps are going to continue to be eligible for the efficiency program rebates that they've been eligible for in the past. And I think we've had a presentation from the Department of Public Service that suggested phasing out the efficiency incentives for heat pumps. We're certainly going to advocate to keep them, or to keep as much of that as we can, but it is a bit of a dynamic environment. So those are assumptions based on what we would provide today. Yes, for those systems.
And is the elimination of the mini split incentives, is that because they're so ubiquitous now that that's the new like normal, or is it because they're not achieving the goals that were originally set up?
It's a little bit of a mix, I guess. On the efficiency side, it would be more your first point, kind of what's the standard versus what's the more efficient piece of equipment, and we'll have discussion around that. There's a separate conversation with the mini splits about whether people are using them to achieve fossil fuel savings. And we think in Burlington, we actually have a good case that they are. And we think we're going to have data through some of our new programs to prove that even more definitively. But statewide, there's been a study that indicated that some of the assumed fossil fuel savings not materializing because people aren't running them in the winter the way that you need to, where they have dual fuel systems. So that's a live discussion. The study showed Burlington did better overall than other jurisdictions.
Yes, and the other thing headwind we're facing is just the economics with natural gas versus oil or propane. Most of Vermont is oil. We're 98% natural gas, and just at the price point, if you work your heat pump very, very hard in the winter, you might break even or do a little bit better, but it's tough. So you're not motivated as the customer to drive this thing really hard in the wintertime. Plus, just by the nature of these things, the ductless heat pumps are space heaters. They're not attached to central distribution, so they're not able to do what we're used to in whole home. When you have a boiler with central distribution and baseboard everywhere, a couple zones. So just by the nature of the technology, it's not a perfect solution in every building.
Which is a good lead into my next question, which is around the affordability for the air-to-water heat pump technology, and that's a pretty new technology, right? So we would expect it to be expensive as it's adopted early, and then have that price fall. And I'm wondering if anybody would offer any prognostication on what that curve might look like and when it might get cheaper, because I think all of these things around incentives and the capital costs we're talking about that people retrofitting would have to undertake. I mean, they're important components of any future policy discussion, and that's why I'm sort of focused on those. So I don't know if anybody wants to speak more about the technologies for the that are available in the cost in the sort of cost curve for the newer office building scenario that was presented.
Yeah, I would ask invite the Synapse team to give that more national perspective. What I can tell you in Burlington is it's cost prohibitive for most, and it's also trying to figure out, okay, if you're going to go to heat pump, you don't really want to do it just for space heating. You want the cooling benefit too, but that's going to require a lot of interior changes to the distribution system in the building. And that adds a whole other dimension to the cost of doing it. But I'll kick it to the Synapse team if you have any thoughts.
Yeah, and I might look to Philip to chime in on this particular point.
Sure, I'm just pulling up an NREL, National Renewable Energy Lab Electrification Futures Study with a cost curve in it that I can share my screen here in a moment, but I'll sort of speak generally to it. So I think I have it here. These are cost and performance perspectives. Shelley, if it's all right, I'll share my screen. So what you're seeing here is sort of generic air source heat pumps, and these could be air to air or air to water. And we're talking primarily about air to water today. And these are for commercial buildings. And NREL did a very detailed study, and I won't bore you with all the details of what went into it, but you see these lines are slow, moderate, and rapid advancement of the technology in terms of cost reductions on the left and performance improvements on the right. And so there's two factors that are working sort of in our favor going to the future. One is that costs are coming down, and the other is that performance is going up. And so you can get away with a smaller system because it's more efficient in the future. And that also sort of drives down the overall cost per unit of heat that is output. And these are, I mean, you look and we're talking, on the order of a couple percentage points per year at best, or a fraction of a percentage point a year. So it's not a incredibly rapid change. And this is a study that's a little bit dated at this point, but I think the trends overall would hold true. I can speak a little bit more specifically about the air to water technology and just say that it is very prevalent in other countries around the world. And it is very new to the US market. And I would expect to see more dramatic cost changes in the near term once it becomes a little bit more commercialized and the distributors start carrying it, as a sort of off-the-shelf solution. Today, it's a bit more custom. You need the air to water heat pump, and then you need a booster to get it to a higher temperature. And so it's challenging to prognosticate exactly what the costs would be, but the numbers that we presented reflect cost today as best as we know it. And this is important, in a relatively new office building where the existing distribution point, to BED's comments, where the existing distribution system doesn't need to be replaced. If you have an older building with a central boiler and the pipes are starting to rust out, or your baseboard radiators are in bad shape, then maybe you need to be looking at replacing the distribution system as well. And at that point, you want to switch wholesale to mini splits or a more centralized system that's like a mini split, what we call a variable refrigerant flow, or a VRF system. And we've seen case examples, one that we worked on with the city of Newton, where an older building had to replace the distribution system and the central equipment, and it was actually cheaper to do to go with this VRF, this heat pump solution. So I feel like I'm muddying the waters a little bit, but I'm trying to say costs are coming down, performance is going up, and there are certain buildings where it's going to be dramatically more expensive today to go with this air to water heat pump, and there are buildings and circumstances where it will be less expensive to go with the heat pump solution, for if you would have to replace wholesale the existing central equipment as well as distribution equipment. And unfortunately, we were limited to sampling three buildings for these case studies and had data limitations. But I think we've captured a pretty good representation of the building stock in Burlington, and maybe to the councilor's point, the next step is to start thinking about the pie as a whole, and what wedges we have covered with these case studies and what wedges we have not.
Thank you. Appreciate that additional context. Are there other councilors, any comments from councilors? Questions on this? No? Well, I really appreciate the presentation, and I guess we'll use it in further deliberations that we'll have in coming meetings. Do you have other thoughts you want?
Well, we do also have Katie to help us begin to think about the policy implications. So if it's okay, we turn to Katie, and thank you, Shelley. Thank you, Philip, for joining us and for the presentation. And Katie, over to you.
Oh, sounds good. Can you see my slides?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, great. Awesome. Yeah, so I'm Katie Kimball-Orrock. I'm with the Building Electrification Institute, or BEI. As Darren mentioned, we worked with Burlington for quite a few years, since 2018, on all things building decarb, and also think about how to make that transition equitable and inclusive for all. So for that part, I'm taking kind of the 10 steps backward, big picture review of this policy type, which is building performance standards. So I'll try and go fast. Do we have about 15 minutes or?
Sure.
Yeah, okay, great. So a building performance standard is really any policy that sets targets, energy or emissions for buildings to meet over time. And that's whether the targets are encouraging reduction of energy use, increasing renewables, electrifying, or getting off fossil fuels. So it really does cover like a wide range of policies, which is why we would categorize the potential Bureau policy in Burlington as a building performance standard. And I'll talk about this a bit more later, but really critical in order for it to be equitable is to pair it with technical support so that we are actually motivating the right actions through the policies. So that's incentives, technical assistance. There's also the chance to embed high quality job requirements or provide training and support to the contractors that will be doing the retrofits. And these have been gaining momentum across the US, including the Northeast. So as we talked about, so New York was actually the first, but then Boston, Cambridge, and Newton are becoming this great trifecta in the Boston area. And then on the right, you can see the list of cities and also states that have now pursued this type of policy. So as Darren mentioned, Newton's the smallest so far. Actually, Evanston, Illinois might also be similar to Newton, but if Bureau passed, Burlington would absolutely be the smallest. So you're definitely going above and beyond as a small city. And that's why it's really important to think through this policy, make sure we can manage its implementation. So we've been working with BED to make sure that we're pulling best practices and lessons learned from these cities to think about how you guys can design a policy. And because they're gaining momentum, there's some great guidance available. Like this graphic on the right is from a USDN framework that we helped develop. And but I actually pulled out on the left some of the core components that I think are most relevant for the discussion today. Really the most critical pieces Burlington will need to figure out to pass a really effective policy. So I'm going to try and stay pretty high level, but want to give you a sense across these design pieces, how we can manage things like, the results of the cost analysis and understanding how to make it work for all different types of building scenarios. So first and foremost is the benchmarking data. It's absolutely critical for any building performance standard. It's how you track and enforce compliance is through the benchmarking data. So you need to make sure that you have really clear internal data management practices. Eventually we'll need to figure out if we're requiring third-party verification, so making sure that the data is accurate. And it's absolutely needed to pass policy like this and actually implement it. But some of the great pieces of benchmarking also is that it gives us data to inform how to design the policy. So it can inform things like cost of compliance if we think about all the different options we can embed into the policy design. I will say many of the other cities usually have years of benchmarking data already under their belt before they pursue a building performance standard. And that's not to say that you guys going for it kind of combined, like pretty close together, is a bad thing. It just means that we need to be even more thoughtful in the policy design since we don't have as much data access to build on, given that the first reporting cycle is in spring of next year. But also what's great about the recently passed benchmarking requirement is that it's just giving building owners great information, understanding their whole building systems, what needs to be replaced, how their energy usage trends over time. And it may actually uncover some low effort solutions to begin with, which is fantastic. And I wanted to shout out, I'm sure you are all familiar with the 2030 district, which is voluntary benchmarking for building owners that have committed to the district's reduction targets. So definitely have a fantastic foundation of, familiarity with buildings in Burlington, knowledge of benchmarking systems, and how to work with building owners. So definitely a great partner to tap moving forward, although we don't want to overwhelm their capacity. I'll go quickly on these, but the next thing that is obviously important is understanding the scope of covered buildings and then the metric you're going to use. And this is where we have some working policy assumptions that you've all mentioned throughout today. So the working assumptions are it'll apply to 25,000 to 49,999 square feet. It will not apply to residential spaces. And it will focus on thermal energy, so space heating, although I'll talk about how we can maybe encourage whole building retrofits, and that the targets will be energy use based rather than emissions. So pretty far along in thinking through these components, which is fantastic. There's definitely still things to, like, details to sort out, and we want to make sure we know how to handle unique fringe cases, but this is a great start. And we do have kind of an estimate of what buildings it will apply to in the building stock. And then the more complicated question that is very tied to the Synapse analysis is timeline and defining feasible targets. So this will be a balance of how do we make a policy that's ambitious and will encourage progress towards our climate goals, but at the same time manage for the cost, the feasibility. We don't want to ask things that are impossible of building owners, especially when they're dealing with a lot of other pressures. So we want to make sure that it aligns as much as possible with that with that equipment replacement cycle, so that the investments we're requiring are making sense for the building owners in terms of timing, in terms of their capital planning. And lastly, we want to, figure out how to set up the target. So just as a start, there's two different options. There's the individual percentage reduction. So say I'm office building B, I need to reduce my energy 50% below my baseline year. So you're being judged based on your own energy usage versus a cohort, which is like all office buildings must meet a certain target. So we just need to assess this for like what works best for local needs, local buildings. And again, that's where the data would be fantastic to have a peek at the benchmarking data, and definitely continue to reference Synapse's analysis to understand what design would be best to move forward with on that front. And then in terms of compliance pathways, so this is where you build in a lot of the flexibility into a policy. So it's not just saying we have these EUI reduction targets over time, but it's also, if that's not feasible for you, if you can't do that, if you have other priorities, how do we somehow allow for these alternative pathways so that way they can come into compliance as well? So that could include giving credit again for that like non-space heating related retrofits, which are still really critical for climate and making healthy buildings. Electric readiness, so wiring and panel upgrades. You don't get that immediate energy savings necessarily, but absolutely necessary if you're going to electrify in the future. And then just audit planning, so getting a full electrification audit and making a plan to reduce over time. So that way building owners can actually build around their building's needs and their tenants' needs. So how do we give credit to those interim steps towards the targets? And then there's just the details in deferrals, which are really important for those who can't afford to comply right now, or there are other barriers. We don't want to penalize them. So that could include deferrals for hardship, construction delays. Maybe there was a major health and safety priority retrofit that needed to come first. Or, maybe they just need a slight tweak. Maybe they just need one more year before their equipment is ready to be replaced, something like that. So those are really important to kind of build into the policy. And this is where cities have gotten pretty creative, and so we can look at what makes sense for the Burlington context. And then lastly, I would highly recommend making sure you have enough support for the buildings that this will apply to. So that's being able to give clear guidance on what to do to comply. Sometimes these targets are a little hard to wrap your head around and kind of model all the options you could move forward with. So we want to make sure we have tools for building owners to be able to assess all the different options available to them. We want to make sure that technical assistance is available, helping navigate incentives, and then also workforce training, like I said, and making sure contractors are available and ready to tackle the things that are required within the ordinance. And I would also add making sure there's time and space to iterate on this and, ask for feedback from building owners. Is what we're offering helpful? Do we have too many building owners asking for help and we need to, have more staff, or we need to find a way to use the private market of auditors and engineers? So really iterating on that over time. So BED is obviously staffed to do some level of this assistance, but we need to make sure we're figuring out how much support our building owner is going to need. And then what are the current staffing constraints, so that we can make sure we get up to a level of technical assistance needed across all the potential bureau buildings. And I know, this is probably the most used example, but the New York City Accelerator is really the best example of a supportive program. It has wraparound technical assistance. It is specifically designed to help support compliance with their building performance standard. So again, Burlington's the smallest city that would pass a policy like this. So by no means would you be able to launch something on the scale of the New York City Accelerator. They have a whole team dedicated to this. So that's why we really need to do some careful planning and make sure that we can offer very tailored, targeted support needed. And I would also argue this is the reason to keep the policy as straightforward as possible. So that way we can focus on this type of support and actually getting the retrofits done, and digging into those hard issues of, has the equipment cost come down? What's the best solution for this building? Rather than having to, get stuck on communicating a really complicated policy and helping folks navigate confusing requirements. So making sure that it's very clear what's required. So given all this, I would just recommend talking to stakeholders, making sure there's ample time for that. I have outlined some that I would recommend talking to. So in terms of building owners and tenants, small businesses that are going to be tenants within these larger buildings, nonprofits, places of worship, maybe under this policy, and then also just businesses with complex energy use types. So I always use the example of like a brewery is not quite as clear of how to electrify all of their uses, something like that. You want to talk about workforce outreach, and again, trying to promote high quality jobs and inclusivity, and getting the workforce needed to help all these buildings comply, and that they're ready and available. And then the last is just the implementation partners like 2030 District, like DPI. How can BED and DPI work together to make sure everything's seamless? So really critical to get this piece right. And that means talking to a lot of folks. So, and sorry, I realized my first sentence is incomplete, but just thinking about, the city of Burlington is very committed to thinking through this design and figuring out how to make a policy like this work and how to tackle this segment of buildings. And BEI has some capacity to support here. But some of the things I would recommend are to, in order to make sure this is as effective as possible, is to really finalize that benchmarking ordinance, get those processes down, get some data in hand next year. Give enough time for that stakeholder engagement. And that way we have time to thoughtfully design these policy components that I went over, review them with stakeholders, see if it makes sense. Actually pass the policy, plan for implementation, and that technical assistance. And then also just a shout out, you guys have some fantastic policies already on the books. The carbon fee, the residential weatherization ordinance, the benchmarking requirement, and now Bureau. And so we want to make sure that we're managing all of those requirements and one is not suffering on behalf of the other. We want to make sure all those buildings have sufficient support. So just having time and space to balance that as well. And that's all I have. Here's my contact info, but yeah, happy to chat through questions or go back to any slides if you're interested.
Thanks, Katie. I'll open it up to committee members for questions.
I just want to say thank you. This is really, really helpful in terms of giving a roadmap that summarizes where we are and where we can go and the in the time that we have. So thank you very much.
Yeah, of course.
Thanks, Jim.
Yeah, as Councilor Bergman said, thank you for laying out what the road ahead looks like, especially after seeing that the beginning of the data coming in. I'm very excited about what this could potentially turn into. And yeah, obviously engagement is going to be really important here. And like you said, in terms of what this policy is going to look like, we need to get that data back. So again, like I said before, very excited about this. So thank you.
Thanks, Merrick. And I'll just add my thanks as well for the steps that you've outlined for us. So it'll be helpful to us as we move forward. I did have one question about the slide on Bureau components, timelines, and targets, where you talked about individual percentage reductions versus cohort targets. And I'm wondering how a cohort target might be implemented in a way that we could implement something like that in a Bureau ordinance.
Yeah, and you know what? I would actually, if Synapse folks are still on the line and have thoughts, I welcome your thoughts too. Boston ended up designing both into their ordinance because each approach might make it difficult for certain buildings to comply. So if it's an individual compliance pathway and somebody just did a fantastic retrofit, they just reduced a ton of their energy, and now they're setting their baseline, they have a much more difficult pathway to reduce even further than somebody who's, say, a really high energy user right now, has a bunch of, controls that they can fix to reduce. They might reach their pathway much easier. That being said, the cohort one is putting one target to a whole group of buildings that might have varying needs. And so it might, there might be one outlier that has a certain unique issue that might find it difficult to perform the same as the others in the cohort. And the last thing I'll say is that the cohort model, you need data to understand where to set that EUI so that it's actually fair and feasible. But yeah, Philip, I don't know if you have additional thoughts. I know you've tackled this in Boston as well.
Yeah, everything Katie said is totally on point, and I would agree with that. I am based on our professional experience with other jurisdictions, I am partial to the option of having a cohort, a sort of fixed standard, and an individual compliance schedule, the percentage reduction, because that gives building owners flexibility. The one challenge I would say with that is particularly for a smaller jurisdiction such as yourself, it's more to manage. The administrative burden to keep track of both the individual compliance schedule, percentage reduction over time, as well as the fixed targets. It's significant, and I wouldn't discount that. If you had to pick between the two, we've seen Cambridge pretty successfully do the percentage reduction, City of Cambridge, and they are a little. City of Newton went with both, like Boston. Cambridge is a little bit bigger than Cambridge is between Newton and Boston, much closer to Newton, and they have what appears to be relatively successfully done the percentage reduction thing. And in my view, if you had to do one and you were concerned about the equity aspect, I might lean towards that. But I think to Katie's point, getting the data in and evaluating the policy design once you have that is a really sensible way to go about it. Newton had the benefit, we helped Newton design theirs, and they had the benefit of having the Boston data because the cities are adjacent. And so you can sort of count on the Newton buildings being similar to Boston. you don't have the benefit of having a really good example from your climate within Vermont or from a very similar climate. So that's sort of a non-answer, but
No, thanks. And as I look at it, I mean, the carrots and sticks we would use in ordinance language would be directed at individuals, not at cohorts. But I guess one way to think about it might be that from a policy standpoint, we would have cohort targets, and we could, like Katie mentioned, if one building was going to have a particularly hard, or a class of building was going to have particularly hard compliance, being compliant with individual percentage reductions, we may have carve outs for that class of building, but that we would still meet whatever our cohort targets are through the efforts of other individuals within that cohort. I just think of like one is sort of like your goals, and one of them is sort of your rules for achieving those goals, I guess, you know, is that a fair way to look at that?
Yeah, I would say so. And yeah, making sure there's some kind of alternative compliance pathway where folks can show that it's not cost effective to meet the cohort target or something like that, that they have an alternative approach. But yeah, I can't say necessarily which one's best for Burlington at the moment. It's just something to think about as we gather the benchmarking data for sure.
Okay, well, thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Other thoughts on this one? No? Well, we appreciate this, and thanks for bringing this to us and spending time with us tonight.
Of course, really appreciate the opportunity.
Is there more thoughts on this?
Nothing more on this. Thanks, Katie. And I know we have one more item as well from the BED side. So,
okay. Well, thank you. And then we'll turn to our next item, which is 4.3 BED Forestry Study Update.
And we may have Betsy Lesnikoski as well, who's our Chief Forester, who's here with us, and we have John Bryant. Thank you, John, for bearing with us during the other conversations. John is conducting the forestry study, has an interim verbal update to share. I also wanted to mention we continue to work with Polarity on the other study. I've had several productive meetings with them and anticipate providing some sort of interim update from them in the not distant future as well. But if it's okay with you, turn it to John.
Sure. Go ahead, John.
Good evening, everybody. I will be brief. You've had a lengthy meeting. I've just wanted to give a status update before I finish my report. I'm planning to be finished in September. It's been a lot of information to wade through, and I just wanted to at least share a few thoughts at this point in time. For those that don't know me, I'm John Bryan. I am owner of K2QC Consulting. I contracted with the city of Burlington in early May to provide a forestry assessment analysis for the McNeil generating station. The scope of work is detailed in the RFP. I listed out just a few of the things that I've observed or had on my list when I visited logging sites. My plan was to have random sites selected. The BED foresters accompanied me to visit those on, I think, 2 visits in the last 6 weeks. Some of the things I look at, it's a fairly lengthy list. I'm not going to go through everything, but I just want to highlight a few. When we go out on the sites, some of the things that I wanted to do is just confirm the process that the foresters use to inspect the harvest sites and address any unresolved violations and what that led to. I wanted to try to understand the acceptable management practices. They're similar to the best management practices we have in Maine, so I'm fairly well versed to that. How they're applied and how the loggers use those. I wanted to confirm the logging closeout, how that's done, particularly around aesthetics on the yards, because you can do the best job you want in the woods, but if the logging site where the wood is brought out is not aesthetically pleasing when they're done, that's all the public's going to view. I wanted to confirm the collaboration between the BED foresters and the Vermont Fish and Wildlife biologists. This seems to be a pretty robust process that's used, which is, I think, fairly unique to the state of Vermont, the BED foresters. So I wanted to learn as much as I could about that and make sure that it was applied uniformly. And then a big priority of mine was getting out on the sites and assuring that the timber that's harvested is utilized properly to the best possible markets, so that any residue that was chipped was truly residue, considered waste wood or something that had no other home, and the McNeil plant could utilize as the last best option for the trees that were harvested in the tops. And then, that sound silvicultural systems were applied. And I'll just say that when I started this process, just a little disclosure, a friend of mine suggested that I put the RFP, put my proposal in to address this in late February. He works for a local utility, and he's aware of what Burlington Electric does. I knew little about the McNeil plant. I didn't know anything about the Burlington Electric Department, or the foresters, or the supply system to place as a way for wood waste to go to the McNeil plant. After accepting my work proposal and the BD contract completion in early May, I began work in late May with a clean slate. And other than that information in the RFP, I knew little about the task in front of me. To date, my work has been really informative, interesting, and very challenging. There's a lot of material that you've produced over the years, the Burlington Electric Department. It's very sound, and part of my job is to make recommendations on what could be improved, and that'll be part of my final report. The field work to date, I've visited 12 logging sites in Vermont and Northeast New York, with at least one BED forester. And my intent was that those were randomly selected, that we view the timber harvest operations and talk to the loggers about their logging process, timber markets, business challenges, and impressions of the McNeil system. And I asked direct feedback regarding the McNeil plant, what it meant to their operation, and how they determined what would go where in terms of McNeil versus other markets. And I had an opportunity to tour the McNeil plant and the Swanton yard to understand the wood chip delivery points. I spent considerable time to date reviewing BED documents, delivery reports, harvest plans, and documentation of public comments and previous consultant reports. When I ask for something, BED provides it in great detail. So I've got a pile of paper on my desk that I've constantly sifted through to make sure that I understand the system that's being used. I did want to share a few observations about the logging service contractors. I really am extremely impressed with the diversity of loggers in the McNeil system, the passion for their work, and their ability to maximize the value of harvested wood to the best possible use. They have a business to run, and the McNeil plant is one of their outlets, but it ultimately is the last resort in terms of value to them that they receive in terms of profit. But it's important to them. They all gave me, I think, very candid answers when I asked the question, what does the McNeil plant mean to your business? Loggers speak highly of and rely on the McNeil system to assure silvicultural objectives are accomplished, and local markets are utilized only for the highest and best of the sources. They really want to get firewood. They want to get saw logs. They want to get the highest timber use to other highest value markets. And I saw that on the jobs that we visited, and they were very different in terms of how they applied that. And I was impressed with the different process that they use. There are legitimate economic challenges for loggers in the McNeil system and the long-term supply chain, which will require continued focus on listening to the suppliers and working together to assure future system viability. I've spent a lot of my career overseeing operations and assuring that loggers were profitable and loggers were maintained, because that is a key part of the supply system. A little acknowledgement. I want to thank the forestry staff at BED for their time and efforts to date to provide their requested documents and harvest plans and answer my questions, educate me to the system, certification requirements, and escort me to logging sites in Vermont and Northeast New York. I had no idea the the difficulty in getting around to the various sites when you think they're 3 miles away and you have to drive 40 miles. You all know that. Vermont has a very unique geography, even more difficult and challenging than Maine does. But the forestry staff were very helpful. And in my opinion, they're very professional, and they have some of the most comprehensive non-public land plans in the Northeast US. Public lands are dealt with differently. A lot of the timber that comes off to the McNeil system comes off private lands. And they have a very unique certification process that they use, and I'll elaborate that more in the report. My next steps are to complete the forestry assessment analysis report no later than September 30th. I noticed somewhere that you have another meeting on the 23rd of September, and my goal would be to present the report at that meeting if possible. And the report will address the topics outlined in the RFP and include suggestions for improvement of the harvesting policy, logger education, and pertinent guidance documents used by BED foresters. I'm making good progress, but there's really a lot to wade through given the history that you have and the comprehensive use of documentation that the foresters use. I'll just say again, I've been very impressed, but there will be some suggestions that I make for improvement. So I'm willing to take any questions. I didn't want to keep you any longer than necessary. I just wanted to give a status report and hopefully get on an agenda for a future meeting.
Well, thanks for that update, John. And I'll open it up to the committee for questions or comments. None from Jean. Merrick?
You can go first.
I don't have anything other than I really appreciate the work that you're doing and the update you've given us here tonight. And we will be talking about scheduling our next meeting soon. I'm not going to be able to be at the meeting on the 23rd, so if Jean or Merrick were running it, then we can still have you back then, John, to present the report. But we'll take that up in a little bit here. So thank you for waiting to give us that update tonight and the update itself. So thank you.
Well, thank you very much. I'll keep in touch with Darren and Betsy, and we'll make sure it gets scheduled as soon as possible.
Do you have more to add? Or?
No, I wouldn't be able to be here on the 23rd either, but we're happy to work with you on follow-up for schedule.
Yeah, okay, great.
Whatever works best for you. It doesn't have to be that day. I just wanted to get on a future agenda.
Yeah, we'll make sure of that.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thanks, John.
Thank you.
And so we'll close that item and turn to our last deliberative item, which is the downtown parking item. And Chapin for that one.
Great, thank you. I've got with me on the phone Jackie Esperti, our Division Director of Parking and Traffic. Goal here is to have a quick presentation from Jackie, wanting to explore DPW is trying to find any and all ways to support the vibrancy and the renewal of downtown. And we have a concept that we want to just lay out, get your input. We're not looking for any action tonight, but your guidance is helpful and for us figuring out whether to proceed, and if so, how. Jackie, I'll turn it to you.
Hello there, good evening. I am just pulling up the presentation. Okay. Awesome. So, like Chapin said, we're looking to hear your thoughts on the possibility of a P4, public-private parking partnership. So really the purpose of this meeting, the purpose of this is to explore the possibility of partnering with private property owners in Burlington, and then provide street parking. So we recently did this, as you know, at Courthouse Plaza, and we wanted to look at what we did there and see how we can improve and how we could make that a profitable business venture, let's say, for us, and also provide more parking at city rates, which so we also do that. We did at Courthouse Plaza, like I said. We also do it at 194 St. Paul Street with Champlain College. So the way that this partnership is set up, which you can see on the right-hand side, this is just an example of 1 month. And I used March because it's probably our least profitable month for the year. We split everything 50-50. So all of the revenue, all the permits that are in that garage, everything is split 50-50 between us and Champlain College. So some of the options that we have for negotiating leases, the 50-50 is one option. We could also do a monthly payment, like a lease option. With the St. Paul garage, the kiosks are ours. We enforce and monitor all the parking. We do the signs, light janitorial, but mostly garbage, snow removal, security, and then facility repairs are all that's Champlain College's responsibility. When we think about these proposals with other businesses, these things are just some examples of what would be up for negotiation in these contracts. So as an example, again, revenues from this would be parking revenues and ticket revenues. The expenses could be lease payment, snow removal, and possibly if we continue to grow this, let's say, business venture, full-time employees would be something as well. Benefits, any parking location is going to benefit nearby businesses because of the parking availability. Downtown visitors, they'll have more options to park. The big thing there is it's very confusing. We get a lot of complaints or concerns with folks parking. They see a big P in the city, similar to the city signs. So they park there and then they pay with Park Mobile or they pay something, or they pay the rates and they're not city rates. And then they get very frustrated, or they get a ticket and then they call us, email us, or come into the parking service office. So there's just some disconnect with the customer service side of the private parking partners. City employee parking and revenue for Budget 265, which is the Parking Facilities Fund. One of my biggest things and something that we can definitely help with is customer service. We have 3 customer service folks in the office, normal business, 7 to 4. We also have a team member available from 7 a.m. to 11 p.m., 7 days a week. We have a phone, calls get forwarded there. We get people calls for all sorts of reasons, but this is just another, we're accessible is what I'm saying. We have a fair appeal process, either in our office or the city attorney's office. And really our goal is just to be a one-stop shop for all things parking in Burlington. That's it. Questions?
Thank you, Jackie. Thoughts from councilors?
Sure. So my big question relates to the fact that while we're trying to support businesses, they are primarily renters, and there is this split incentive as we have in the issues with heating. And, just looking at Nectar's, which went out of business, and they tried to get the Handies to renegotiate their rent, and the Handies said no. And my understanding of the flexibility that building owners are having, and so these are the owners of these lots in the downtown, is that they are not coming to the table. Now, they may be suffering as people stop paying rent, but they're not lowering their rents to take into account all the problems that people are facing. And I was at the meeting, as was Chapin this morning, and Mark was, I think you were at that meeting with the businesses this morning. And so I'm really concerned about a subsidy of those folks. And I guess that the question relates to the negotiations, right? But in terms of its fairness. But I've got real problems if they're not playing ball with us across the board. And so the devil is going to be in the details of this. There is absolutely that disconnect between the public and private lots and the systems and the costs that are associated. And I hear complaints about what seem to be outrageous private costs associated. So I would love to be able to work through this problem. And perhaps there is a real partnership, but it's got to be a two-way street. And I'm not sure that I'd be interested to see the lessons or hear the lessons related to the Courthouse Plaza parking, because it seemed like, our subsidization didn't pan out in the optimal way. And I'm not sure that I would consider them to be the type of player that the Handies are. In fact, I don't. But it raises sort of some big questions. So yeah, thanks.
Thanks, Gene. Mayor, thoughts?
I share Councilor Bergman's concerns about the situation on the ground. I need to probably look into data more. I always thought that we had enough parking downtown. The problem was why weren't those spots being filled, or potentially the location given construction and the like, and how we get folks to our parking spots. And with construction and all that, it's required us to be creative, and I do appreciate the creativity. But yes, I do certainly share Councilor Bergman's concerns about partnering with potentially with the same landlord class that has been a part of the struggle that businesses are facing in regards to rent and the like. So thank you. And yes, I would like to learn more about those.
Mark, before you pipe in, one other thing, it just has to do with integrating data from the Lakeside garage. I don't see that as I go, because that's the way I go from my house down to Pine Street, for example. I cut through that little alleyway, the bike path there to get to, Pine. And I don't see it being utilized like the Marketplace garage. And I know we have Marketplace garage vacancy too. And there are a lot of reasons for that. But if that could be part of the conversation, so that we really do have a full understanding of the parking shortage, or at least the reasonably priced parking shortage, that would be greatly helpful. Thanks for letting me insert that.
Yep.
Great.
So I'm excited about this. I welcome the out of the box thinking about parking. We know as we take street parking away, either because of construction or because of road reconfiguration, bike lane additions, we hear pretty consistently complaints from businesses about, parking proximate to their businesses. We all may think it's okay to walk 3 blocks to get from parking to retail or restaurant or whatever. But, community has, people that are consuming those services, they have choices. And if they want to go to a big box lot out in Williston, they can do that even more easily, more conveniently from their parking perspective. They may do that. So I think we should be exploring these things. And I think in the memo, you talked about even like employee parking at like 200 Church and those folks wanting a place that's closer for them. It would be secure parking of some kind. So I think this is a good idea. I think one of the things I wouldn't want to subsidize any parking arrangement if we could. I think we bring benefit to the partner in, we market the parking, we're going to take care of collection of parking revenue and all of that. So we're bringing something to the table as well. And so we can come to some agreement with partners where we're not subsidizing, but just trying to split revenue 50-50, like in the example Jackie talked about. I think that's something that's worth looking at. And whatever other additional things we can bring as a city to the equation that don't really add cost for us, but they allow us to leverage something existing that we're doing, whether it's, patrol or it is some, light janitorial or whatever. So there's that. I hear, and I think that it's a separate issue, but one that I know that at least one other counselor's talked about trying to fix is this. I won't call it deceptive advertising, but when you see the big P on a sign, some people wrongfully assume it's public parking. So either we differentiate our parking with a different sort of symbol that says, I don't know, but somehow to differentiate or require that the signage be presented in a way that it's clear that it's private parking and not public parking, and the expectation that it may come with that a higher rate. So that's a different thing, but something also that we should be talking about, because I do think our parking system gets a bad rap when someone gets what they think is price gouged for a spot. So I welcome these discussions. I look forward to them, and anything we can do to reduce any of the parking friction that our downtown diners and shoppers and visitors have, I think is welcome. That's helpful.
Yeah. This is an exploratory conversation. We're having conversations with others and stakeholders in the community. So we come back to you at a subsequent meeting with kind of recommendation on where to go next.
And some of these may be unique situations, right? Like, parking lot owner A, the arrangement we come to with them might be different than when we come with parking lot owner B. So
I also just wanted to add that the parking shortage, I think, is coming based on the hotels that are opening. I think that's something that we are preparing for, and this is one of the solutions that we're starting. This is just a solution that we may need in the future. So if we start now, then we'll be prepared for it when that parking shortage does come.
Let's hope we have a parking shortage.
That's what we're hoping, but I know we have some things in the pipeline, so that's the hope.
It'll mean we have economic vitality.
Yeah. Well, City Place is opening, or it's not City Place, but they're starting to have people move in within the next month. And so we're starting to get them rental places and get them spots, and the hotels will be opening. So we're hopeful that it's starting.
Does DPW have this projection data that could be shared with committee members?
I can look into that. We don't have solid numbers yet from the builders on it, but we can probably get estimates based on the number of hotel rooms that are going to be opening and what we currently have for hotel rooms.
Yeah, I would definitely, like Councilor Barlow said, if we are going to reach a parking shortage in the near future, that's very exciting, and I'd like to see what those predictions look like.
Any other thoughts?
I just want to say, Mark, that you made some really good points, not the least of which was the lack of a subsidization that would, in a way, get to the, not having the problem that I was, articulating. So thank you for making that clarity.
Sure, thank you. Any other things on this? We'll go ahead and close this item and move on to director's report. We have a director and a general manager. I don't know if any of them want to offer a report, but this is your time.
Defer to Chapin. Oh, look at that. I'm going to be very quick on a couple key items. One, last month while I was on vacation, you all met and discussed the 3-acre stormwater rule and the stormwater agreements that we've been negotiating with homeowners associations. You all approved and recommended they go to city council. You would split one off the Strathmore agreement. We have just received confirmation today that staff has reached agreement with Strathmore HOA. There is one minor, I consider minor tweak that in the agreement that allows staff to continue discussing with them the ongoing management and who's responsible for stormwater facilities that are on private property that are primarily for the private property owner. Specifically, there's one swale in Strathmore that is of contention. The only edit to the document is that we continue discussing responsibility for that. I see that as a relatively minor change to the agreement. And with your kind of concurrence of that, we would plan to bring all the agreements to the council at a September 9th or 8th meeting. So Strathmore plus the other ones. So I just wanted to give that update and hear if there were any concerns about that approach at this time.
I defer to the chair of the ordinance committee, see if he's okay with that.
You're on mute.
He's
Yeah, I know. I was like just joggling. No, I think that we've got some meetings scheduled and should be able to do that. So the ordinance, we have these agreements. Remind me again, Chapin, what ordinance changes, the sequencing of changes need to happen?
These are just agreements that are going to council, not to ordinance committee, is my knowledge.
Didn't they come to ordinance committee last time? Didn't we look at these last time we had ordinance changes?
I can't remember. I'm sorry.
Split one of them off.
We did.
I thought that was at the last TEUC meeting.
Was it?
I think so. I don't think that we are dealing with chapter 26.
Yes, I guess it was too.
Those are
Gene and I serve on both.
Yeah.
Okay.
So yes, these do not.
So the ordinance committee has no problem with this.
Does any TEUC members have an issue with just having this continue on to the full council without?
With that one addition for Strathmore.
As long as you've got them to be agreeing to something that is reasonable with regard to stormwater retention and the maintenance of the program and all the things that the other ones were doing, I mean, that's fine, right? Otherwise, they sort of are waiting at their danger, at their peril. And, I don't want to continue to pander to that.
So what we'll do is we'll send you all the email with the specific language change. I believe it's minor and am fully confident that it can go and be on consent on the council. But if anybody has a different thought, please follow up via email with us.
Would this be coming on the 25th?
On the 8th of September.
I do have a question. If this one of these sites of contention does result in a change to the agreement, does that restart the process? Does it come back to us if the agreement must change?
I'll get back to you on that. I don't know the answer to that, and I don't want to give you the wrong information. But. Okay. Second item is you just received an email from Clayton, who works late. The board did approve this morning the collective bargaining agreement for the urban drivers for GMT. It's a 4-year agreement, 3 or 4 year. Oh boy, it's been a long day. We had a 7:30 a.m. meeting. It's a 3 or 4 year agreement. It is a good agreement. It gives financial stability to the authority. And as Clayton said in the email, it does not add to the financial cliff concerns in future fiscal years. So it gives us, I think, a strong base to know where we're headed. That said, even with that direction, we will likely be the board of GMT evaluating further service cuts around November for implementation later into 2026. Largely, this is a legislative strategy to show how dire the cuts would be. We wouldn't implement them, but it would be a kind of clear shot that if the legislature doesn't act and help us, of what would be coming after the legislative session. So just letting you know that that's on the board's workload coming up. And with that, that's it.
So just here we go again with this.
Yep.
Darren, do you have anything?
I don't.
Okay. And so any councilor items?
I don't. Except I don't think that we got anything recently from Clayton.
Okay, I will forward that along. It just came to 102 people. I thought you were on that list, but I will forward
I just looked at my emails right now and I didn't see it, but I could have missed it real quickly, or it could have just come.
There you go. Lastly, we have the matter of the next meeting. I'll be away on our regularly scheduled meeting, which would have been September 23rd. I will suggest we have actually 5 Tuesdays in September, so perhaps we could meet on the 30th instead, if that worked for folks.
I will be back from being out in Montana from the 24th to the 29th, so the answer is yeah, that will work for me.
Would work for you? The 30th works for me, but I'm now, the earliest I can probably do is 4 p.m. Like we can't do any more.
Right, which would be fine if we could meet at 5 though, right?
Yes.
Okay, we could continue meeting at 5 this fall, if there's a room available.
It looks like 6:45 Pine is available.
So do we want to say that our next meeting is on September 30th at 5 p.m. at 6:45 Pine? Yes?
Works for me.
Okay, done. That was easy.
Calendared.
Let me see what's on the agenda here and whether there's anything. There is a council meeting on the 29th. So yes, I don't see anything on the September meeting that is mission critical for the 23rd.
We know we'll have an update from the Forestry study, it sounds like. Maybe.
Possibly that polarity as well.
And maybe polarity.
We gave them more time.
Okay, excellent. Well, having no other business before us and absent objection, I will adjourn us then at 7:28.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.